What's up? You're watching Hive Mind, the most spineless show on the internet. My name is Zzineohp, and today I'm joined by my invertebrate co-host, Graydon. Alright, before we get into it, let's try to define biological accuracy. Essentially, the vast majority of anatomy has a homologue or bone cognate. For example, your hair is a derived equivalent to the feathers of a bird or the scales of a reptile or fish. So if someone was drawing a humanoid reptile covered in scales but with no hair, that's fine. If somebody draws a humanoid reptile with no scales but with hair, I mean, it's not a very good furry, but it's not biologically inaccurate. But if somebody draws a humanoid reptile with scales and hair, you're gonna have a bad time. And for those that don't have a cognate, I find it important to include them and disclude any relevant human features they lack. A turtle should have a shell, a snake shouldn't have legs, pretty simple. So let's fetch a fresh batch of Anthro. We'll start in the mammals with Tigress from Kung Fu Panda 2 and Kung Fu Panda. And Kung Fu Panda 3, but she wasn't really in the fourth one. Now, a lot of the inaccuracies of Tigress can be chalked up more generally to her being a cartoon character, but that won't save her. Tigers do have four-toed paws, but those are on the back, while the ones in the front have four toes. Her leg, although it does bend at the appropriate number of joints, appears to have a more plantigrade feel with the bottom two segments united into a foot, rather than the digitigrade legs that tigers actually have. Additionally, all this white fur and a plumper face, while making cartoons more personable, also protects their faces from wounds and are therefore more common on males. Now, this will be a common theme. It's difficult to tell the difference when looking at an individual, because oftentimes the difference is something being comparatively larger in males. Her arms have these distinctive stripy patterns, far more pronounced than anywhere else on her body, which I find weird. In general, it seems like tigers have far weaker patterns on their limbs than on their body. In general, though, most of my complaints are pretty nitpicky. I'm fine setting the bar high at 9 out of 10. Jumping to the birds, it wouldn't be this series without a visit to Haluva Boss, and since I've seen the show, I can pick a deeper cut, with that being the worst wife in all of fiction and second most hated. She doesn't have wings, but I'm fine with human arms. But humans do in fact have 5 fingers. I'm also really impressed with the hair, which is made out of feathers. It retains human length, but that wasn't my issue, so fine marks. And as a child, her feathers are much more furry, matching the down feathers of an immature bird. She does also have teeth, which birds don't have. That might just be the weirdness of baby bird mouths, except it couldn't because she also has them as an adult. So some birds, like geese, have ridges on the bill that mimic the structure and function of teeth. So exactly what species is she? Well, in the original Lesser Key of King Solomon, Marquis Andrealphus is supposed to appear as a peacock, and it stands to reason his blood sister would be too. But she doesn't really look like a peahen, and she and Stolas, who is an owl, have a daughter who's also an owl, so children don't necessarily have to resemble their parents, and therefore each other. Either that or it's all paternal. Speaking of whom, Stolas is supposed to appear as a raven, not an owl, and while his domain is astrology and herbs, Andrealphus is supposed to be a master of measurement and geometry.
So I don't know where Miss Madrano got the ice thing from.
And I wouldn't exactly trust her to be accurate to the lesser key in general, so I'm gonna have to count the teeth against her. Other than that, it's not the easiest to get an exact read on her pharyngeal anatomy, but the fact that she seems to be animated as she's speaking the same as a normal human doesn't bode well. Birds can mimic consonant sounds, but they would be using the syrinx located deep in the throat. The fact that she needs to close her mouth to articulate these consonants indicates that A, she doesn't have a syrinx, and B, she has a humanoid mouth, including a soft palate and lips. What else? Her beak and buccal areas are animated to be soft in this scene. Her eyelashes are weird. Okay, fine, I'll talk about it. So mammary glands are an evolution unique to mammals, hence the name, and it's inaccurate for them to occur on a bird. Of course, we don't know she has mammaries until we see her nipples, and we probably never will. She definitely doesn't seem like the type who's nurturing enough to breastfeed. She probably had some impish wet nurse or something. Anyway, the pectoralis major, the muscle responsible for this type motion, is known for creating 2 big lumps in this same region, which is how I explained the Twitter lady from last week. If she flaps her wings enough to fly around, she would certainly build up pecs. But Stella has no wings, so between all of these, I'll drop her down to a 6 out of 10. Oh, you might want to hide your dad from this one. It's Beans from Rango. She has hair. Now, honestly, this really seems like a wig. This does not look like the real hair of anyone I know. I mean, I get that it's a period piece, but did anyone even have this hair back then? I will err on the side of reasonability and say her hair is a wig. Besides, none of the other characters from this movie have hair. Well, except for the squirrel lady, but she's a mammal. Now, this lady brings up a whole set of new issues because she's a fox, not a squirrel, so the sizing proportions are just all messed up in this movie. But Fantastic Mr. Fox got away with it, and that film's a classic. What was I talking about? Yes, right. Her eyes are more more front-facing than the desert iguana, the species she's based on. I only mention this because the fact that she closes one eye to shoot clearly indicates she has binocular vision. Also, she does have eyelashes, which makes the thing about her hair being a wig a bit harder to defend, and her mouth is definitely too human. She has a clearly defined lips, and it only extends this far on her mouth, which is weird because Rango, who's also a reptile, doesn't have lips, and his mouth covers his entire face. And once again, she only has 4 fingers. I get that that's like a cartoon convention, but why? Is it that hard to draw 5 fingers? Overall, her biggest issue is with the head, and that already has a lot of allowance, all spring for 7 out of 10. And now we move into the uncommon Anthro species, so we will have to move to independent artists. Here's a 2 for 1. I think they're autistic or something. Reddit said so at least. Now, if you'll remember the shark girl from last time, you'll remember this is way longer than the appropriate tail length. That just also includes most of the spine, right? Haha. Wrong! I'm the zoolinguist, and I'll decide what's right, you heard? See, while in cartilaginous fish they have the pectoral fins, arms, here, dorsal fin, pelvic fin, legs, anus, anal fin, bony fish have the pectoral fins here, and the pelvic fins here. So what that means is that you have to add all of this spine growing beyond the legs, even though that the actual tail begins at the anus. And there's no extra pelvic fins drawn here, so no harm, no foul, no... Hey, isn't that an extra pectoral fin? Yeah, no, that's definitely the pectoral fin. So then what's that? Okay, so we have another member of the 6 Limbs Club, but at least they're in the right position. Well, these guys are clearly based on some sort of catfish and the rainbow trout, and they have their pelvic fins positioned further back past the dorsal fin. Okay, fine. Maybe they just got it wrong, but surely there's more to be happy for. Let's discuss the hands. 4 fingers certainly seems to be the name of the game today. How many fingers do fish have? That's a surprisingly good question. This boils down to what fin homologies exist between ray fin fish, and lobe fin fish, humans, and others. These are both reliant on derived processes, particularly these giant fin rays that make up the body of the fin, but we don't need to know exactly how many of these they have. It's more than 4. But a more modern theory is that fin rays aren't homologous to fingers, it's the body of the fin that is. But in that case, they should have no fingers and instead should have fins. It's a lose-lose situation, and it looks like you lost. 4 out of 10. Oh, Zzineohp, don't you have a weird thing for Hymenoptera in general? You're right, I can admit this is peak, because I will peak my microphone when I scream about how bad it is. So, I don't even feel like there's much to say that hasn't already been said. Human limbs are not homologous to insect limbs, so she has 4 limbs that she shouldn't have, and is missing 6 she should, and she only has 4 limbs anyway. Also, her human limbs are entirely on her torso because the abdomen is, shockingly, homologous to the abdomen. But hold on, these could be stylized bug limbs. I mean, they don't look too much like human limbs after all. Well, let's actually look a bit into what Hymenoptera limbs look like. Well, it's actually somewhat similar to humans, not just because of the terminology. It's broken up into a big bone, an outward bend, and a little bone, an inward bend, and multiple smaller bones. Again, bees have 2 tarsal claws, not 4. But the biggest difference is how it attaches to the torso. The gnathostome humerus attaches directly to the ribcage, while the arthropod has 2 joints called the coxa and trochanter that attach the femur on. And a shoulder! You cannot hide your sins from me! Also, just in general, arthropod legs are really sharply segmented, hence the name. And it's weird because her legs actually are that. Now, again, the face is where I can be the most lenient. But why does she have the frickin' Blue's Clues ears? Bees don't even have particularly thick antennae. She has breasts again, her mouth looks nothing like a bee's mouth, and finally, one single leg of hers is bigger than her entire friggin' torso. Bees eat 10% of their body mass a day. How does she even have enough room in her digestive tract for that? The poor thing is probably wasting away. And so I will pity her and bump her up to 4 out of 10. So next up, it's Little Miss What's-Her-Face from Undertale. Now, I chose Muffet mostly because she actually does have what appears to be arthropod limbs. They're long, spindly, with sticky-outy bits around the joints. She appears to have 3 tarsal claws, which is a perfectly reasonable amount for an unspecified spider, and her shoulders and hips are covered by a frilly jumpsuit. But she falls for the oldest trick in the book, hair. She has chelicerae, but her pedipalps are absent, and yes, females have pedipalps, they just don't have palpal bulbs. She has an odd number of eyes, though this could in theory be 2 eyes that were fused together, possibly due to some freaky birth defect, leaving her with an accurate total of 6 eyes, but her torso is messed up. If a bug has human limbs, its abdomen shouldn't be added, but if it has bug limbs, then the abdomen should be attached. Otherwise, her anus is here and half of her legs are on the abdomen. They should be on the thorax. Actually, spiders don't even have a thorax, so they should be on her head, which should be combined with her thorax, sort of like Benzino. So overall, she drops into a sorry 2 out of 10. I had plans for another entry, but honestly, what I saw made me physically sick. What I'll say is this: leeches are hermaphroditic, and they have gonopores instead of complex external structures.